Paris, 1925. The city hummed with the sound of trams and laughter, of cafe chatter, and the clinking of coffee cups. The Great War had ended, and with it came a strange kind of optimism, the sort that blooms in the shadow of chaos. France was rebuilding, modernizing, dressing its wounds in marble and glass. Yet beneath that golden surface lay a current of desperation, men who had lost fortunes, men who had lost faith, and men like Victor Lustig, who saw opportunity in illusion. Victor was not born to wealth, but he was born to charm. He could talk his way into a palace and out of a prison. His eyes carried both warmth and calculation, and his smile could convince a bishop to gamble or a thief to pray. He moved through Europe like a whisper. Nobleman in Vienna, banker in Budapest, art dealer in Rome. No one ever saw him twice in the same suit. He was, above all else, a student of human desire. And in 1925, that desire revolved around money, ambition, and the new gods of commerce. One morning, while reading Le Matin at a cafe along the Champs-Élysées, Victor came across a small article that sparked an idea so outrageous that even he had to laugh. The Eiffel Tower, the pride of France, had grown old and rusted. There was talk in government circles of tearing it down, of selling its metal for scrap. It was a rumor, a bureaucratic whisper, but in the hands of Victor Lustig, it became the foundation of the greatest con the world had ever seen. Within a week, he had forged a set of official-looking documents, complete with the government seal and the signature of a high-ranking minister. He rented a suite at the Hotel de Crillon, one of the most luxurious hotels in Paris, and sent elegant invitations on embossed paper to 5 of the country's leading scrap metal dealers. Each letter was marked confidential, government business. When the men arrived, Victor played his role to perfection. He greeted them as Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs, apologizing for the secrecy of the meeting. Over cognac and cigars, he explained that the French government, in its pursuit of modernization, had decided to dismantle the Eiffel Tower. The cost of repairs was too high, and public opinion, he claimed, favored its removal. The tower, he said with a sorrowful sigh, would soon be sold for scrap metal, quietly, discreetly, and quickly. The businessmen listened in silence, their eyes gleaming with greed. To own the metal of the Eiffel Tower, it wasn't just a deal, it was a symbol of power, of prestige. Victor spoke softly, elegantly, the perfect bureaucrat. He promised that whoever won the contract would be handsomely rewarded and remembered in Parisian history. He didn't need to push them. Ambition did the work for him. Among the group was one man who seemed particularly eager, a scrap dealer named André Poisson. He was new to the upper ranks of business, a man desperate to prove himself among Paris's elite. Victor saw that hunger immediately. He nurtured it. After the meeting, he arranged a private conversation with Poisson, speaking to him like an older brother. He hinted that the deal might go to someone else unless certain unofficial considerations were made. Poisson hesitated only briefly before agreeing to pay a bribe to secure the contract. In addition to the official payment, he handed Victor a suitcase filled with cash, an amount large enough to make most men faint. Victor took it with a solemn nod, promising that the transaction would be finalized within days. Then he vanished. By the time Poisson realized the truth, Victor was already in Vienna, sipping champagne and reading the French newspapers. The story of his con had not yet broken. Poisson, too ashamed to admit he had been fooled, never went to the police. Victor smiled. The perfect crime was not the one that fooled everyone, it was the one that silenced the victim. But Victor Lustig was not a man content with one triumph. A few months later, emboldened by his success, he returned to Paris and attempted the same scam again, with a new group of buyers. This time, however, the police got wind of his scheme, and he barely escaped the city before they closed in. Still, his legend had been cemented. Over the following years, Victor traveled the world, conning millionaires, bankers, and even gangsters. He sold money-printing machines that could supposedly duplicate currency. He swindled the gullible and the greedy alike, always staying one step ahead of the law. Even the notorious Al Capone, the king of American crime, fell briefly under his spell, though Victor, astonishingly, managed to scam the gangster and lived to tell the tale. In time, however, the game caught up to him. In 1935, he was arrested in the United States for counterfeiting. When agents finally placed him in handcuffs, one remarked that he was surprised to find Lustig so calm. Victor only smiled. "If you're going to steal," he said softly, "steal big." He spent his final years in Alcatraz prison, cell number 300. Even there, among thieves and killers, he held a kind of mythic status. They called him Count Lustig, and he carried himself with the same elegance he had worn in the salons of Paris. He died in 1947, his death certificate listing his occupation as salesman. And, in a way, it was true. Victor Lustig was the greatest salesman who ever lived. He sold dreams, illusions, and, once upon a time, the Eiffel Tower itself. Even today, his story drifts through the streets of Paris like a ghost, whispering from the shadows of the great iron monument he once pretended to own. The tower stands still, defying time and gravity, a symbol of human genius and folly alike. And somewhere, perhaps, Victor Lustig is smiling, knowing that for a moment in history, he truly did sell the unsellable. The story of Victor Lustig didn't end in that gilded hotel suite or even in the damp, gray cell of Alcatraz. His legend continued to ripple outward long after the man himself was gone. It wasn't merely the audacity of the Eiffel Tower scam that fascinated the world. It was the artistry of it, the precision, the understanding of human vanity so deep that it became almost poetic. In the years after his Paris triumph, Lustig roamed the Atlantic world like a phantom of prosperity, surfacing in Vienna as a diplomat, in London as a bond trader, and in New York as a Wall Street investor. Wherever fortunes gathered, he followed. He could speak 5 languages fluently, play the violin, and recite Shakespeare with a perfect English accent. He dressed impeccably, favoring gray suits and pearl-tipped walking canes. Those who met him described a strange magnetism. He could make a man feel simultaneously inferior and flattered. He understood that the first rule of deception was simple: make the victim want to believe. Lustig never pressured anyone. He didn't need to. He offered what people already craved: power, prestige, wealth. He sold them the reflection of their own greed. In America, he discovered his greatest audience. The 1920s roared with unchecked ambition. Wall Street was the new cathedral, and its priests worshipped speculation. Lustig blended into this world with ease. Under the name Count Victor Lustig, he began peddling a miraculous invention, a small mahogany box that, he claimed, could duplicate currency. It had brass dials, narrow slots, and the faint scent of machine oil. He called it the money-printing machine. The demonstration was flawless. He would insert a genuine $100 bill into the device, turn a handle, and after a few minutes, another crisp, identical note would emerge. He explained that the machine required chemical time delay to imprint the currency perfectly. His marks, businessmen, bankers, and self-styled visionaries, were too enchanted to question it. By the time they discovered that the machine only produced 2 real bills before turning out worthless paper, Lustig was long gone, leaving behind only the echo of his laughter and a faint trail of cigar smoke. His fame, or infamy, spread across continents. He defrauded millionaires, impersonated government officials, and forged bonds with the confidence of a head of state. He even managed to con the most dangerous man in America, Al Capone himself. That story became part of his legend. Lustig approached Capone with an investment proposal, asking for $50,000 to fund a business venture. The gangster, curious and amused, agreed. 2 months later, Lustig returned, his face solemn, and handed back the money. The deal, he explained, had failed, and he couldn't in good conscience keep Capone's funds. Capone, impressed by such apparent honesty, gave him $5,000 for his trouble. What the mobster never knew was that Lustig had never invested a single cent. He simply kept the money safe, betting on Capone's ego, and won. For years, the Count lived like a shadow among the wealthy. He was seen at charity galas, sitting beside bankers and politicians, all of whom believed him to be a man of impeccable reputation. Yet his empire was built entirely on lies, and lies, as always, are only as strong as their teller. In 1935, his luck finally faltered. The Secret Service had begun tracking a flood of high-quality counterfeit bills circulating across the U.S., each bearing the same tiny printing flaw. The paper led them to a quiet apartment in New York City, Victor Lustig's final stage. When agents burst in, they found stacks of counterfeit currency, printing plates, and ink. Lustig stood calmly by the window, his expression unreadable. "You've caught me," he said simply, as if greeting old friends. Even during his trial, he remained polite, almost charming. He corrected the grammar of the prosecutor once, earning a burst of laughter from the press. The judge, weary but secretly impressed, sentenced him to 20 years. He was sent first to Leavenworth and later transferred to Alcatraz, the island fortress that held America's most dangerous criminals. There, the man who sold the Eiffel Tower became inmate number 300, a number as stark and empty as the steel bars that surrounded him. But even there, Victor Lustig never fully ceased being Victor Lustig. He taught languages to fellow inmates, wrote elegant letters to the warden, and offered advice on ethical persuasion. He was, to the end, a gentleman rogue. When he died in 1947 from pneumonia, the guards found in his personal file an extraordinary note written in his own hand. Under occupation, it said salesman. And perhaps he was right. He sold ideas, dreams, fantasies, things invisible yet priceless. The Eiffel Tower, after all, still stands tall over Paris, but the story of the man who sold it stands taller still. It endures because it speaks to something deeper than fraud. It is about the hunger that drives men to believe the unbelievable, the same hunger that built empires and destroyed them. In a world obsessed with success, Victor Lustig understood one truth better than anyone else, that the line between ambition and deceit is as thin as paper and as easy to print on. Some say that if you walk beneath the Eiffel Tower late at night, when the city quiets and the Seine murmurs below, you can still feel his presence, a whisper of silk, a glint of gold, and the faint echo of a voice saying, "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce myself. I represent the French government." And in that moment, the greatest business cheat in history smiles again, forever the man who sold the unsellable and convinced the world it was worth the price. There is something haunting about men like Victor Lustig, men who understand people better than people understand themselves. Long after his death, those who studied his life agreed on one thing. He didn't just steal money. He stole certainty. He showed the world how fragile trust truly is, how easily a seal, a signature, or a confident voice can unravel the fabric of truth. After the Eiffel Tower con, Lustig's life took on the rhythm of a phantom's dance, never in one place too long, never using one name for more than a few months. He could become anyone. In Prague, he was a scientist demonstrating a radium process that promised to turn water into energy. In Berlin, he was a diplomat brokering post-war reconstruction deals. In Rome, he appeared as a minor nobleman seeking investors for an airship company. Every performance was perfect. Every audience believed. He understood that the world after the Great War was desperate for visionaries. Governments had fallen, currencies had collapsed, and faith in institutions had evaporated. People no longer trusted kings or priests, but they trusted money. They trusted progress. Lustig simply gave them what they wanted, a way to believe again, even if it was a beautiful lie. He kept meticulous notes about human nature. When he was finally captured, investigators discovered a small leather notebook among his possessions. Inside, written in careful script, were what he called the 10 Commandments of the con. They read like scripture for the art of deceit. Be a patient listener. It is this not fast talking that gets results. Never look bored. Wait for the other person to reveal their weaknesses, then never reveal your own. Always appear as if you have an important secret. Never boast. Let others describe your virtues. Never lose your temper. Always show respect for the other man's opinions, no matter how foolish. Let the other man feel smarter than you. Be discreet. Never discuss your personal affairs. Never lie to a woman unnecessarily. To Lustig, deceit wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Every gesture, every pause, every smile was designed to lead his victim to one inevitable conclusion: this man is trustworthy. Even those who tried to hunt him admitted a kind of reluctant admiration. One French inspector, long retired, was once asked about the Eiffel Tower affair. He chuckled and said, "He fooled us because he understood us. He made us want to believe him." That's the rarest kind of criminal. But Lustig's charm was not without loneliness. Beneath the elegance, there was restlessness. The thrill of deceit was intoxicating, but fleeting. Each success left him emptier than the last. The chase became his only real pleasure. The brief moment when he stood between being caught and getting away, heart pounding, the world spinning on a knife's edge. In the late 1930s, when the world began to tilt toward another war, the age of the con artist began to fade. Governments tightened borders, new technologies exposed lies faster, and paranoia replaced trust. The world was no longer dazzled by charm. It was armed against it. By the time Victor Lustig was captured, he was tired. The years had dulled the shine in his eyes, but not the precision of his voice. The agents who arrested him said he offered them coffee while they searched his room. "It's good to have guests," he told them with a faint smile, "though I suspect your visit will be brief." In prison, he was different from the others. While most men cursed, Victor read books, psychology, literature, and philosophy. He wrote letters to his daughter, Betty, whom he adored. In them, he never mentioned the Eiffel Tower or his crimes. He wrote of Paris sunsets, of the smell of rain on iron, of the music of café accordions. In those letters, one could glimpse the man he might have been if he had chosen honesty, a man of refinement, wit, and intelligence. One inmate recalled that Lustig often stood by the bars of his cell during twilight, staring at the fading light over the bay. "You look at that sky," he once said, "and it's all illusion too. The colors, the depth, it's a trick of the light. Maybe we're all just marks in God's little con." When he died, few noticed. The newspapers carried a small obituary, misprinting his name as Victor Lustig. No mention of the Eiffel Tower, no mention of the scams that had once made him infamous. But legends don't need headlines to survive. His story had already escaped the pages of history and settled into the realm of myth. Today, every time someone forges an email, scams an investor, or sells a dream that's too good to be true, a part of Victor Lustig lives again. His ghost lingers not just beneath the Eiffel Tower, but in every deal born of desperation and desire. The greatest cheat in history did not merely sell iron and steel, he sold faith itself. And when you think of it that way, perhaps the man who sold the Eiffel Tower was not stealing from the world at all. Perhaps he was only holding up a mirror, showing humanity the grandest illusion of all, that we are never as honest as we pretend to be. And if somewhere in the Paris night a shadow tips his hat and vanishes into the crowd, you might imagine, just for a moment, that it's him, the Count, the salesman, the dreamer, walking away once more, leaving the world behind, smiling at his masterpiece. It is said that the great con artists are part magician, part psychologist, and part poet, and Victor Lustig was all three. He understood that illusion was not simply about tricking the eye, but about enchanting the mind. And the mind, especially one hungry for success, could be led anywhere with the right kind of story. In the years after his death, those who studied his life, journalists, historians, even criminologists, realized that the Eiffel Tower affair was not just a heist. It was a parable about the human condition. For what, after all, made it possible for one man to sell a national monument? It was not his charm alone. It was belief. Belief that even the impossible could be owned, that even a symbol of pride could be reduced to profit. Victor Lustig understood that greed wears a fine suit and speaks with cultured words. When he met with those scrap dealers at the Hotel de Crillon, he never begged for their trust. He let them offer it to him. He let their imaginations do the work. That was his genius. He didn't deceive people by force. He let them deceive themselves. There's an old story, perhaps apocryphal, but too perfect to ignore. that many years after Lustig's death, one of those original dealers, André Poisson, was seen walking beneath the Eiffel Tower with his grandson. The boy, perhaps 8 or 9, asked if it was true that a man had once sold the tower. Poisson paused for a long moment, staring up at the lattice of iron that glowed gold in the Paris dusk. Then, quietly, he said,
"Yes."
And the greatest trick of all was that he didn't steal from us. He showed us who we were. That's what made Lustig more than a thief. He was a mirror held up to the roaring 1920s, a decade drunk on confidence, bursting with invention, yet secretly trembling with insecurity. It was an age that worshipped progress, but doubted permanence. What better symbol to sell than the Eiffel Tower, that monument to modernity itself? He chose his target not for its value, but for its meaning. The tower was France's pride, its proof of brilliance and resilience after the war. By pretending to sell it, Lustig proved that even symbols could be bought, that nothing, no matter how sacred, was beyond the reach of money. And perhaps that is why the story endures. Because every generation has its own Lustigs, men and women who understand that people crave belief more than truth. In business, in politics, in love, the pattern repeats. Someone offers the dream, someone signs the deal, and only later do they realize the price. After his capture, the FBI reportedly interviewed him for hours, fascinated by his intellect. One agent later wrote in a report, if he had chosen to work honestly, he might have built an empire. Perhaps that's true. But honesty would never have satisfied him. Victor Lustig wasn't chasing wealth. He was chasing mastery. He wanted to prove that intellect could outwit institutions, that a single man with nothing could manipulate the machinery of nations. Sometimes, at night in Alcatraz, guards would hear him humming softly. A waltz, they thought, something old and European. Inmates said he walked with the same posture he had in the drawing rooms of Paris, his spine straight, his shoes polished. Even in prison grays, he carried the air of a gentleman. It was as if he refused to let the world write his ending for him. When he died, his few possessions were inventoried: a silver pen, a worn copy of Les Miserables, a notebook of quotations, and a single photograph of the Eiffel Tower, folded carefully in half. The image had a faint smudge where his thumb had often rested, as though he'd been touching the memory of his greatest performance. No one knows who placed a single white rose on his unmarked grave that spring. Some said it was his daughter. Others claimed it was a woman from Paris who had once been his lover, or one of his marks. Whoever it was, the gesture felt fitting. The world had finally buried him, but not his legend. Today, a century later, con men still study his methods. His name appears in textbooks, his notes quoted in business seminars about persuasion and trust. Even modern marketing owes something to his psychology, the art of making someone want what they do not need. In that sense, Victor Lustig is still at work in the world. Every false promise, every too-good-to-be-true offer, every shimmering illusion that seduces with sophistication, it all traces back to that smiling man in a fedora, standing before 5 greedy businessmen in a Paris hotel room. The Eiffel Tower still stands, proud and defiant. It has survived wars, revolutions, and weather, and it has outlasted the man who once pretended to sell it. Yet if you walk beneath it on a quiet evening, when the tourists are gone and the lights shimmer against the dark sky, you can almost feel his presence, a whisper in the wind, a soft echo of laughter. He might say, "Gentlemen, remember, everything in life is for sale. The trick is finding the right buyer." And perhaps he would be right. For the greatest business cheat in history was not just a thief of money. He was a thief of certainty, a master illusionist who proved that the world's most valuable currency is not gold or power or even truth. It is belief. And as long as there are dreamers, schemers, and those who think they can outsmart both, Victor Lustig, the man who sold the Eiffel Tower, will never truly be gone.